and welcome back. This is the Agent Workforce podcast and episode number 9. My name is Kristiina Åberg. I lead marketing at Digital Workforce, and with me we have Niko Lehtonen, who's the AI solution architect at Digital Workforce. And today we have a special episode with a guest, Rami Luisto, data scientist at Digital Workforce. Welcome, Rami, and would you like to introduce yourself shortly?
Thank you, Kristiina. And yeah, sure. So as mentioned, I'm Rami Luisto, one of our data scientists. Recently, my official title has also been the AI researcher. So I'm part of the agentic workforce, and then I'm responsible also for creating and developing agents, but also keeping up to speed with the most recent advances in the field.
Amazing. Great to have you with us in this podcast. And today we have two special topics with Rami. One is a deep dive into some of the research that Rami has been looking into. That's something Rami and Niko will discuss. And then Rami will share one agentic use case that he has been working on lately. But before we dive into those, let's go through some of the updates, what has happened in the past week or so. And we need to get started with OpenAI. They've just yesterday announced that they will switch from LLC into a public benefit company, which is a type of legal business structure designed to explicitly balance the pursuit of profit with a clearly stated public benefit purpose. So this is something we've been waiting for, what's going to happen to OpenAI structure, and that's what they have now announced. So for-profit will become a public benefit company. Non-profit will control and be a significant owner of the public benefit company. A non-profit and public benefit company will continue to have the same mission. Do you guys have any early reflections on this news?
Well, I mean, from my side, the only thing I thought of when I heard about this is this going to be enough for what they had determined to do? Are they for-profit enough for their funding to be triggered and so on? I guess we'll see in the future how that goes.
Yeah. For me, I've kind of had one eye looking at the advances, like how they plan to rework their structure and how the kind of all the big actors are let's say wrestling for power and influence and so forth. It's kind of, for me, it's like kind of watching some gossip show or something like that, or a very, very high stakes soap opera. So it's interesting to see, but I'm also waiting for a little bit more chewed down analysis on what the practical effects will be. I know it's a big thing, but then again, also on the technical level, I doubt this will have immediate effects, but any hints where they go into more kind of public service direction and I'm just hoping that they would go into more kind of open source direction would always be a benefit, but it's a very, very big change, but I'm waiting for other professionals to have opinions for me to ingest.
Okay, so let's talk about the sycophancy thing. So OpenAI 4.0, they rolled out a new version of 4.0, GPT 4.0, which was originally launched in May 2024. So approximately a year ago, but on April 25th, they updated the GPT 4.0 and people started noticing that it became noticeably more sycophantic. So it started to please the user. So not just flattering, but like validating doubts and fueling anger, urging impulsive actions, reinforcing negative emotions and things like that. I don't know if you guys noticed that. I didn't. I was using the other models, so I didn't really pay that much attention. I noticed people talking about this online, but fairly quickly on April 28th, they started rolling back. So, we have access to the earlier version of GPT 4.0, which gives more balanced responses. And they have also made an update on, I'm sharing that on the screen now. So that's what they have named, expanding on what they missed with sycophancy and what led to this type of model update. And I'm just going to scroll down a little bit here so you can go and check this yourself. And how they do currently review models before deployment, what went wrong in this particular instance, why did they not catch this in the review process, and furthermore, what are they going to do in the future to avoid this type of situations. But what are your thoughts on this? And should we be scared? I mean, what comes to agents and us building agents? So is this type of behavior something that we can expect like suddenly from our agents? And any comments?
Well, the short answer is depends a lot on how you build them. If you build them like we'd built them, this would have been a non-issue, because we always make sure that we stick to the same version of LLM and it doesn't auto-update. So, for instance, like you said, you missed this completely. So did I, because the solutions where we are using GPT-4o, we're using a certain version of that model, and it's been set so that it doesn't auto-update. So if we want to update the version, we will test it first, and then we'll update the production version to use that model version. I can actually show you
Yeah, please do.
how this goes on the Microsoft AI Foundry. Yeah. So here, I started to deploy a new model. I'll just look for GPT-4o. I could search for it here as well, but it's here, so no need for that. There's a lot of different models available, as you know, all the way from the oldest ones to the O3 and O4 minis and so on. But yeah, if I choose GPT-4o, I'm getting this sort of a window where I get to choose deployment type, and I'll get to do some customization here. So here I can choose the model version I want to use. Right now, there's only 3 ones available through Microsoft. OpenAI might have a newer version, even if the April one was rolled back. But these are the ones on Microsoft's AI Foundry. And this is the important bit: model version upgrade policy. So here we have opt out of automatic model version upgrades, or upgrade once the current version expires. Both are quite good. I would still use the lowest one, because if you haven't tested the version it's going to update to, you might run into some issues. It might be suddenly very sycophantic, for instance. Unlikely, but there we go. But yeah, these are the settings with which you can make sure that your model sticks to the one you want to use. And it's very similar actually to how it was back in the RPA days, and how it is with RPA stuff. Like if you're automating something that requires you to use Google Chrome, for instance, users usually, Chrome updates automatically and so on, but you can disable the automatic updates. And when we talk about RPA, RPA is so fragile and volatile that you want to make sure that no applications update by themselves. Everything needs to be tested before you let those things update in production. So just like in enterprise environments, you disable Chrome's auto updates, with LLMs, you want to disable the model updates if you're using it in an enterprise setting.
Yeah, and I think the same theme then kind of continues from RPA to more classical AI solutions, where like often there is the possibility that in theory we could have an AI system kind of automatically learn more and then update its behavior and so forth. But very rarely have we ever wanted to actually implement this kind of thing, because what we really want is something boring, something frozen, something that leaves an exact audit trail and which we can replicate if there is any sort of issue. And I let's say I strongly agree with everything Niko said, and that I think this reflects the massive difference we have like in enterprise level agentic systems and LLM usage, and what the average individual sees. And yeah, it's kind of, let's say it's our job here in the back end to provide a system where we keep track which models are available, when are they expiring, like when should they be updated, and yeah, very very crucially, run a huge amount of tests when we want to update the system, because especially with the LLMs, it's less everything is more statistical in nature, so testing becomes paramount. But then also and yeah, I also didn't actually observe it firsthand because I was using other models and endpoints. But I think the key point, and then I wrote down what you said, Kristiina. You said it became noticeably more sycophantic. It didn't kind of turn psychopathic from not being at all psychopathic, but it kind of increased the tendency. And I think this is one of the big kind of somehow almost defining properties or features of most LLM models. They somehow want to, please, they want to be able to be helpful and useful, and then they want to give you answers, and these are like all sides of the same very multifaceted coin, that there is a tendency for them to prefer to tell you yes. And let's say for my personal use, I tend to have a lot of instructions where I repeat that it's okay to tell me no. I like to be challenged. I like to be disagreed with. So it's maybe this brought it more to the kind of to the awareness of the population, and also I think their article is quite nice because that also shows like what happens when the back end people, like a mistake happens, because I'm
Yes.
sure they update the models constantly and they have a lot of testing and whatnot, and sometimes things go wrong, and then they're kind of describing exactly what went wrong and how they try to remove that error in the future.
Yeah. Totally.
And I just want to say that I wouldn't be surprised if this is just another way to keep them in the media spotlight.
Yeah. We can speculate on that, but it might be just a mistake, as they state. But I want to share something else that's slightly related to this as well. So the Harvard Business Review article. So this was published on HBR on April the 9th, 2025. The title is How People Are Really Using GenAI in 2025. They had a similar article in 2024. And in this article, the writer is comparing, based on a lot of data, Reddit conversations, and all sorts of sources that he has used in these articles, how people are really using GenAI, not just ChatGPT, but other GenAI tools out there. And what's noteworthy here is that I will share the use cases in top 10 use cases in 2024, on the left-hand side, and 2025 on the right-hand side. And we can see that the three top use cases in 2025 are therapy, companionship, organizing my life, new use case, and then finding purpose, which is a new case in 2025. And there are a lot of professional use cases here, like generating code for pros and so on. But of course, there are a lot of personal life-related use cases. But this is important because of the sycophancy conversation we just had, that I think OpenAI, they noticed as well, and in their statement, they said that they had noticed a big shift in how people are actually using ChatGPT, like the other tools, for their deeply personal advice in the different, you get that for professional advice. I use O3 a lot to get second opinion for professional advice type of things. So these companies, these models have quite big power and responsibility if you think that you're using the tools for therapy and companionship, or guiding you in finding purpose in your life or organizing your life, and then it's being sycophantic. So that's a scary combination. So any comments on how the use cases, top 10 use cases, have shifted?
From the top 3, the first thing that comes into my mind is this probably shows how much the younger generation is adopting Gen AI tools, services, and so on, and the purpose for which they're using them. I can say I know many people of my age who would spend a lot of time with Gen AI tools, where the top 3 would be the reasons for them to use them.
Good point, especially like finding purpose. I would also very strongly guess that this would be more of a thing for a young person to do than for someone in their 50s or 60s. Usually the purpose has been found, and so forth.
I have to admit, though, that I made this exercise myself, the purpose piece on ChatGPT, and I found that very, very valuable. And that was because of trying to identify the core values. And that's not an easy task. If you're getting asked that, what are your core values in your life? That what guides you in all decisions that you make? It's not the easiest answer to give, like just out of the blue, at least to me. So I did this exercise with ChatGPT, and I found that quite useful. And it gave some like tips, how could I start enforcing some of the core values that have been very crucial to me earlier in my life, but have gotten like into a stagnant mode because of other things in life, but I still like miss those pieces of my core values. And I think I found that quite useful. So I don't know.
Yeah, and like I've seen a more, let's say, meta level. I really like this the idea of this study of like instead of asking OpenAI and others like where should these be used, they actually went and see like what people actually do with them.
Actually doing.
Because sometimes like when I reflect what I do personally, what I value, I kind of try to take an honest look on what I say that I would like to do and what I really end up actually doing because that's more reflective of what I've found valuable enough to sacrifice my few few free hours I have in a day.
Yeah. And you can go and check the full list. So there are a lot of personal use cases, of course, but loads of professional use cases as well. So Harvard Business Review lists all these 100 top 100 use cases for GenAI right now, 2025. But
I
that's
notice
it.
I'm
Yeah.
cringing a little bit at 26 medical advice. Like for sure there might be cases where it's might be apt, but in general I that causes some concern for me.
I know, but it's the 26th. If you think it's quite high on the
Yeah,
list, so people are using it for that purpose. So
yeah.
that's okay. That's great. So hey, let's move on. Just a quick update on Google before we go to the main topics of today. So Google has a service, Labs Google. We discussed Duolingo last time, and we have some language enthusiasts in the podcast, and I know that in our audience as well. I wanted to show you one thing. There's this thing called Little Language Lessons, and you can activate that by signing in with your Google. So you can try with tiny lessons, so find relevant vocabulary, phrases, grammar tips for any situation. Then you can go to a slang hang, which is a conversation between two native speakers, or then you can go on to a word cam and snap a photo to learn something about your surroundings. And I took a test. This is a bouquet of flowers on my desks, and I'm into Spanish. I really enjoy Spanish, but don't have enough time to really practice that. So I just wanted to see what kind of vocabulary it gives me from the bouquet of flowers, and it identifies what kind of flowers I have in the bouquet. So I have lilies and carnations and eucalyptus, and that's quite nice. So some little language update from Google side. So it's like discussed the Duolingo part. So yeah. So we're starting to get these language tutors, language mentors, just as we like in these models inbuilt, which is quite handy. All right, but hey, moving on to the main topics of today. So this is over to you, Niko, to lead the research.
Yeah. So I'll be taking the journalist hat here and engaging our beloved data scientists in some hard, difficult discussion. So, Rami, since you're coming from the academic world, how do you see large language models infiltrating the academic scene? Are there, for instance, research papers that you found recently, during this year or so on, that you feel could be purposeful and interesting to us and our audience?
Yeah. So I actually went through some of my let's say favorite articles of the last roughly half a year to pop out some of my favorite ones. And yeah, before starting to go through these, maybe the baseline here is that as we all know, these LLMs they advance at an like a ridiculous speed. Like in the within 6 months there will be new models and new events and new model types and whatnot. So it's the research field is really struggling to keep up, especially anything peer reviewed where it can be years of process and everything will be delayed by then. But so the kind of research, I think it has spread a lot more to also kind of professional corporate blogs or white papers. Like even though there is of course the, let's say, risk of them having very specific biases, but the speed is sometimes of an essence. And that's why, for example, the stuff written by Anthropic or the blogs by OpenAI can be really valuable. But also from from the publishing side, we get so much stuff coming out all the time. So from my point of view, from the reader's point of view, there is a little bit of a challenge as well to keep up with everything. And Kristiina mentioned the notebook LM just now, and that has been an excellent tool for me because I often kind of what I do is I collect a batch of articles that seem interesting in one theme, and then I feed them all to Notebook LM and then generate the podcast episode. Then I listen the episode on my way to work, and that will usually give me a rough overview of which of, for example, the 5 papers are actually most relevant to what I need to do, and then I try to make time to read them at some point or summarize and then read the relevant part and so forth. But yeah, the first paper I kind of wanted to mention, and this is something I've recommended to other people on LinkedIn as well, which is I think one of the greatest papers on large language models in the past few years, called ChatGPT is bullshit, and the title is very provocative, but what I want to kind of start with is to emphasize this paper doesn't mean that ChatGPT is bad or that it's kind of lying or that it's horrible or anything like that. But it gives a really nice frame of reference to think especially about the so-called hallucinations of these language models. And the kind of major theme here is that the kind of goal in life for GPT. So what GPT really values is to generate similar text as it saw before, something that might be kind of relevant to the situation. And especially when we run up against something like a hallucination or something where the text generated is not necessarily wrong, but it feels a little bit weird. That the model I have in my head is me in high school in the history exam, where I have to write down the history of the independence of Nepal. And I don't remember at all about the independence or history of Nepal. So I just start writing and I write stuff which I think would be relevant, but I have very, very little kind of innate interest to make sure if it is actually factually correct. My aim is to get points from the teacher. And this is very much what in my mind LLMs do, that they like to generate text that will get points from the human reviewers. And it's not a bad thing, but it is a very good highlight of the fact that LLMs are very different than from humans. And especially if you use them for something like therapy or companion or something, and you just talk with them on the chat window, they might actually seem completely human. And the fact that they seem human is a great testament to their current quality and their power. But especially when you start to do important things with them, it's good to remember that they're actually not. And in the agentic perspective, like let's say when we're building automation stuff, we usually have something like RPA or classical algorithms. Then we have might have some kind of let's say classical AI systems. We almost always have a human in the loop at some point, and then we might have these LLM components as well. And the crucial thing to remember is that these are all different, and the difference between an RPA system and a human is very easy to see, like it's almost intuitive. But the difference between a human and an LLM can get a little bit sort of blurry. And then that's why actually many of the papers I kind of I seem to have ended up reading in the past 6 months are actually about the otherness of these language models. But I also like it's not only that some kind of qualitative idea that okay they're different. Well, that's good information, but what's actually actionable? And another which ties also very much to this kind of sycophancy article you mentioned is this article published in Nature about the title is framed as very LLM negative, but I would again urge not to think of this as an article telling that okay this is why LLMs are bad. This is again an article telling how LLMs are very different from human behavior, and that's why we have to somehow handle them a bit differently. And it's fun because I read this a few months ago, before this sycophantic tendency of the one model, and the underlying issue is sort of the same. So here the writers go through this situation where they're asking various like multiple choice questions from LLMs related to medical stuff. And then they've injected bad questions where the real answer cannot be deducted or it's nonsense or something like this. And the biggest issue here is that the LLM really likes to give an answer, even when there's no good answer to give. And something we discussed earlier, or that I've been thinking a lot about, is in one agentic case we've been developing. There is a situation where quite often people have to reach out to other people for extra details. And when planning how to do this, the immediate idea would be to tell the LLM, okay, do we need to ask for more information? And that sounds reasonable, but what it then always happens is that the LLM tries to be helpful and tells you, oh, what a great idea that you need to ask for more information. Here's a list of 5 things you should ask. So it's very hard to have it say that, no, like I don't need more, this is enough. So instead, with this kind of difference in mind, what turned out to be a lot more reasonable is to tell the LLM that, okay, here's a list of things that should be, like we need to know, like is all of this mentioned somewhere in the data? And then it can answer yes or no, and it can kind of fulfill its personal value of providing feedback, and everything will go much smoother.
And this is this is in general one of the things where we're building these enterprise level LLM solutions and agents and so on differs so much from how consumers use these systems, because we can affect the system prompt, and we have knowledge files, we have context files, we give it all the data it needs to we give the solution all the data it needs to come up with the output and the outcome. Whereas in consumer use, often it's asked a question and it's relying on its training data to come up with the output. So having those restrictions and setting that scene of what data to use is explicitly and especially is really important with these systems. Like I wouldn't build a single solution that doesn't use any sort of context and knowledge files and so on, because otherwise you're just going to get something that will hallucinate eventually, if not on the first go.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the, I'll jump a bit ahead on my papers, like one other, I'll zoom in a little bit. So this is one of the Google research papers, because I think what you, Niko, said, you're touching on this kind of very, very big issue we currently have with many LLMs and agentic systems, is that we only have the kind of working memory and the, like, out of the box, the LLMs, they only know stuff they learned at training time. And it's very hard for them to learn new things unless we push it to context window And usually we have to use some sort of external system like retrieval augmented generation or in it, like it's always a kind of a clutch at the moment. And Google is not the only one trying to solve this. I think all the major players are trying to solve this issue of creating a sort of long-term memory and properly kind of dividing up the labor that we would use the LLM for the thing it's really good at, which is kind of making deductions and thinking, and not trying to use the same model for memory and kind of like let's say long and short-term memory and then all that kind of thing. So it feels like we're kind of going in this weird cycle where we first had small AIs, narrow AIs doing things, then we had big LLMs that suddenly can do everything at once, and now we are again trying to split the LLMs to more kind of to components that kind of more closely resemble what happens, for example, in a human, where we seem to have like not completely separated, but seem to have different areas in brain responsible for different things. That the Google paper is quite technical, but it does like you can read between the lines that this is a really important problem for all of the fields, and it's those who first start to get out solutions that actually natively interleave this long-term memory to the LLM behavior will have massive benefits. Kind of like we saw with the most recent DALL-E image generation, when OpenAI was actually properly able to kind of tie it into the language model. The previous versions, they had a very separate image generation model, and then the LLM would, in the background, it would help you write a better prompt for the LLM, but the kind of the channel between the language and the image generation was really, really narrow. It was just one prompt going in. And with the new model, it can do massively better things because the thinking model can actually interact with the latent space of the image type, to say fancily.
So I guess one of the things in layman's terms is to say that you can improve on the output you're getting by prompting it more. Like I saw, I was generating this one image and I needed there to be 4 people in that image. And there was a lot of text I put in that, and it went really well, but there were only 2 people of the 4. So I asked it to, that's great, but I need there to be 4. So next round, almost the same image, like all the details were there, like they mattered. And now there were 3 people, not 4.
Yeah.
But I had to run it once more and say, that's great. I need 4 people. There's only 3 currently. I guess I need to emphasize that how many there are currently, so it would understand there needs to be more. And then I got to the end result. But if I compare it to how it would have been a year ago or something, I would have gotten completely different types of images and so on. Whereas these were very, very similar, and you could tell that they are based on the same. It's much more iterative now than it was before, and that really is useful for me.
And that's
But have
also,
you?
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Rami. You first.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna strongly agree that like one of the huge like specific differences is this like editing images and then also consistency. You can get like if you want to create a cartoon or a comic book or something, you can actually get several images with the same like characters who actually look the same instead of like almost the same but created completely differently.
Yeah. But have you noticed that if things start to go wrong, not to the direction you want it to take, it's almost impossible to convert back. So it's easier to start entirely a new chat with a new prompt. You can't go and fix that back. At least that's my experience. And that's what some people are advising to do as well, that if that will happen with your image editing or whatever, it's best to just start a new conversation. And even that might remember in some cases what has been the topic in the earlier ones. So have you come across this one?
I can say first, I do that with Cursor as well. Is I need to sometimes start fresh, otherwise I will never get to the end result.
Yeah. I think I also it's like it's even more emphasized now that I also use cursor on basically daily basis. And that's actually also one of the things that it's a kind of good example why I do like reading a lot of research papers, because like some of the papers that are here, for example, the somewhat famous recent paper by Anthropic, where they discuss this that they have an better idea what the language model does kind of when it's thinking. They're doing this sort of tomographical analysis. And on one hand, this is not very helpful for building an agentic system. This is kind of quite theoretical, quite deep down. But on the other hand, reading things at this level and the baseline understanding does help to kind of catch these weird phenomenon, like this issue where if there starts to be kind of mistakes and errors, then it's hard to get away from them. And for me, the mental model is that, like, when you kind of zoom in to the language model and to the core LLM, what it's doing, it's trying to generate more text that would fit the context that it's currently in. And if you're in a context where you've had like more and more arguments with the LLM, where you're saying like, okay, you did it wrong, do it again, you did it wrong, you did it again, then the context that we're in now is that the LLM sees a conversation between two, a person and an AI assistant, where the AI assistant is constantly wrong and needs to be kind of admonished, or needs to be kind of told to do something differently, meaning that it's much more likely to continue generating text where an AI assistant is currently wrong. So it's like when you have the right frame of reference, it's actually sadly very natural, and then resetting the conversation is a good thing, because then you can kind of start fresh with the conversation. And it makes a very interesting mental exercise if you want to get the language model to do something very specific. And then especially if you have to do something where you sort of have to argue with the LLM, then you don't want to argue with it as you would argue with a human, because then the LLM will start, generating more argument. You want to leave the conversation to be such a conversation where in the end you would expect to see the answer you want to have. And it feels like I'm turning my brain slightly to the wrong direction whenever I have to think those, but it's I think it's very, very educational. And yeah, moreover, to kind of pivot from that, like this fact that they tend to, like, once you start having more and more errors, you very easily get stuck to having these more and more errors. Okay, like two things to go on from there is that I read this one really nice blog post where the author was suggesting that what we should do with these chatbots, especially like cursor and these programming helpers, is that when the system detects that, okay, we're now having actually an issue where we have to iterate between possible problematic solutions, it will sort of mark the conversation at that point, and then it will iterate on how to perhaps solve it. And once we get like an even roughly good solution, it will then delete all the kind of complex troubleshooting and errors and iterations, and then just write a short summary of we solve it like this, and then we sort of go on. So we dynamically would snip out from the conversation these parts where we start to do mistakes. And like all this kind of stuff, I find it such lovely ideas, because you sometimes hear these worrying things that, okay, we can't scale the LLMs any bigger, we are running out of training data, we are running out of compute. But yeah, we might be running out of training data, but there's still so many tricks and techniques and stuff we can do to improve the performance of these systems, that it's like I'm not at all worried that the systems wouldn't continue to advance. We have to do a little bit more work than just to throw more compute at them. Yeah, there was some other thing I was planning to say, but now I forgot it.
That's fine. That's fine. Are there any other papers? I can see you have a lot of tabs open. Anything
Yeah.
in particular you'd like to raise?
Yeah.
Then
So
maybe we can We can also give the audience links to these papers so they can read up the others as well if there's something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
let's drop them in the show notes. We'll share all this in the show notes. So
yeah, sure. I have quite a bunch, but maybe I'll just I'll drop the links to all. I think they're all worth reading. And also, like more generally, I would advise this Anthropic's Transformer Circuits thread. It's more of a like long connection of really interesting articles that are sort of deep dives to many technical internal parts of transformers, which are I like to read them. They give you background information. But yeah, maybe I'll just highlight a few of these my favorite ones. This one I think is from a company called GreySwan. Roughly one of its objectives is in LLM security, but there's a lot more applications. And this is one sort of a practical application of these types of techniques that Anthropic was discussing on how we can kind of do a tomography on what the LLM is thinking. And their idea is that these kind of classical ways of making an LLM not do something, either to resist a prompt injection or simply kind of narrow down its scope in an agentic system, is to use the language model itself to understand when it's doing something wrong and then output a sequence where it tells that, no, I don't want to do this. And that's kind of, you're having the issue common to basically all of computer science, that the data and the instructions are one and the same thing, and then that is an issue. But what they kind of display and show is that you can actually create these so-called circuit breakers, that you have this ongoing active, let's call it tomography, of the kind of mental setting of the large language model. And whenever it seems to start thinking something forbidden or planning to do something unwanted, as Anthropic showed that these systems sometimes do, they plan ahead, and they also know when they're about to hallucinate sometimes. And we can simply have the system shut down based on this kind of, let's say, tomography results. And this improved the kind of resilience against attacks and the kind of reliability and trustworthiness of these language models by like orders of magnitude. It was ridiculously good. Of course, it's nothing is ever 100%, but it seems the difference is like someone trying to not to say the word elephant or not to think about an elephant. Like it's very hard. It's easy not to say elephant, even though I just did several times. But we're all now thinking of elephants, and the circuit breakers will catch those types of ideas. Not something that like you or me would do, but something I would guess that the OpenAI and Anthropic people will soon kind of implement in their systems.
Yeah,
And then I would say that this is a very positive sign that everyone is always worried about hallucinations and prompt injections, and then part of it is because they make for very good headlines, but there are already good kind of protections, and then the protections are advancing also really well.
Yeah, and I think this was also mentioned in the Anthropic's paper about understanding how reasoning models work in a very short paragraph, but still, yeah. What I wanted to say is that prompt injection and so on is again something that is more a problem for purely LLM based solutions, and not so much for the types of agents again that we build, because we have so many other things as well there that make that problem go away very efficiently. But yeah, Kristiina, how do you feel about this? I know this was quite a technical discussion and presentation, but we did ask a data scientist to explain these things, and I think we can say he delivered.
he did indeed. Thank you so much, Rami. That was a great cover of all the important papers that you're following. And I think we have many listeners and viewers who really are into this side of LLMs and more technical things. So very valuable. Thank you. And I will also take some time and go through some of the things that you pointed out there. So thanks. I think that was highly useful and valuable. Thanks again. I also had one topic for you, Rami, which I would like you to describe to us, because I know that you've been working with many agentic use cases within digital workforce, but there's one particular I have in mind, and it's about this invoice handling. And would you like to share us shortly about the use case? What have you been working on and how it has evolved, and what have we been able to achieve?
Yeah, sure. That's a very nice use case, especially since we got it to production last week. And yeah, so the base idea is invoice handling, which is something we've been doing like way before all of these large language models. But it's let's say it's invoice handling with a twist. So that the base idea is that the customer is getting a lot of invoices that list the hours of rental workers that they have hired for various tasks, and that the customer needs to report internally all kinds of stuff from these invoices, but in particular, they need detailed information of how many hours were spent on normal hours or doing various types of overtime. And as luck would have it, there is not just one or two big companies sending these invoices, but there's, I think last round we had, there were like 50 different providers of this kind of workforce. When we started the project, we did a kind of first proof of concept version just using a combination of classical RPA and classical AI systems, where we would use the Azure Document Intelligence essentially to extract from these invoices the metadata and then the tables listing the various work hour types. And then we had a kind of secondary, let's say, system based on AI ideas and then heuristics and then regular expressions, where we would go through the tables we extracted and try to detect based on keywords and the working hours and then all these kind of things, if that particular row in the table was overtime or not. And it worked reasonably well. I think we got something like 50% of the invoices handled completely correctly. And the customer liked that, but then they were asking that it's still burning a lot of their time to go through the rest of the 50%. And that's when we decided to try and work on this with LLMs. And there were kind of a few major things that the LLMs were here very good for. And the first one was that really often to understand if someone was working overtime or not, sometimes there was a clear flag of, say, stating overtime, and then everything went fine. But more often it might have been that it just states that, okay, this time they worked from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., and then it sort of implied that now it was overtime. Or maybe they had simply listed that the same person on several different rows, and then their hourly price would sometimes be one price and sometimes 1.5 of the normal or twice the normal. And for a human, it was almost always immediately obvious, like you could look at a glance and realize what's going on. But this was very hard to describe the classical AI system, and that's where the kind of LLM superpowers came to be. So the system now has like a few different LLM calls in it, and the base idea is that we use the LLMs on several different points to write summaries of the invoice, both on kind of the total invoice level and then on the level of individual tables we found in the document, and with special, I would call them breakpoints, where early in the process that the LLM sort of has the power to understand that, hey, actually, this is one of the nice invoices where in the very first page, they have listed kind of that this invoice has this person working for 500 hours, none of them overtime. And then we can kind of immediately stop. Whereas the old system has to, by design, go through all the tables. And again, there are various guidelines that if the prices don't match, then it will report an error and nothing goes through. But this was, I would say, very like a very, very educational project also internally, because we're doing like a very, very classical situation where we have an existing automation that we want to improve with an LLM or an agentic system. And like another important part was that the very typical kind of error mode of the original system was that there was massive tables of like listing every single work hour of like a dozen different employees. And the Azure Document Intelligence would sometimes kind of get confused where the boundaries between columns and rows went. And again, for a human, it's very easy to kind of take a glance and understand what's going on. And it turned out that an LLM was also relatively good at fixing these kind of corrupted tables from the data. So we were able to kind of, there were like several points where we were able to rescue situations which were borderline impossible with classical AI systems, or especially with RPA. And yeah, we got significant improvements and let's say learned a lot of very, very crucial ways to kind of work with legacy systems that also now want to do agentic extra components. So that was yeah, that was very cool, I would say.
Yeah, thanks. And that's a good use case that demonstrates how we can combine different technologies and
Yeah.
building on top of the strengths of some technology and using others for other purposes. So that's great. Thanks.
And then also one other thing to maybe add, like as Niko mentioned earlier, that like even though we get this kind of prompt injections and LLM security headlines all the time, like in this case, yeah, we have an LLM, and then LLMs can be prompt injected, but that requires that someone has like access to the like LLM endpoint, like, and these were invoices that the company got from its subcontractors to kind of about work hours. In theory, like, yeah, you could have a prompt injection in an invoice, but I would claim that would be rare. And even if someone sneaks in a malicious invoice this company and it ends up in our system, like the only thing it can produce is to create weird working time allocation hours, and then those will be caught by the kind of guardrails, checking it against the kind of contract that was made. So as Niko said, prompt injections are really cool on a personal level, but in agentic systems, yeah, we have to be aware of them, but they're not the kind of immediate continuous threat that some people say they are.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Rami. I think that's all for now. This was a special episode, very good, valuable, in-depth information. I know that you guys are working on a webinar as well in the coming months, and with a working title that the difference between creating AI agents and regular LLM use. So for our listeners who are interested in hearing more about this topic, be on the watch out. So we'll be announcing this soon, I hope, when we just nail down the date and the content. So I will start advertising the webinar then. But that's all for now. Thank you again, Rami, for joining us. Niko, as usual, thanks for your inputs, and thanks all, and look forward to speaking with you all again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
See ya.
everyone.